He didn't even smile when he opened the door. No, Mom, no, you came. Not even the faintest sign of surprise. Just that look. Flat. Irritated. As if I were a solicitor with a clipboard and a pitch. He leaned against the frame of the oversized door, his new house stretching behind him like a smug beige castle. 3 stories, wide windows, polished wood floors I could glimpse past his shoulder. I'd seen the pictures, but up close, it smelled new, expensive, cold. "I suppose you're here for money again," Seth said. The words didn't shock me. What shocked me was how prepared he was to say them, how quickly they flew out of his mouth. Like he'd rehearsed them in the mirror that morning, brushing his perfect teeth. I stood on the porch, my suitcase beside me, still wheeling slightly from the cab ride. My flight had landed 2 hours ago. I'd taken a red-eye, slept maybe 40 minutes in total, but I was there. Fresh blouse, modest earrings, sensible shoes. I'd flown across the country to see the house he kept bragging about in emails. "Come see it when you can," he'd written back in March. "We've got a guest room now." That was before he stopped answering my calls. I didn't say anything right away, just looked at him, at the lines deepening around his mouth, at the shoulders pulled tight beneath his linen shirt, and something inside me, long dormant, folded its hands and stood up. "I'm not here to argue," I said. He sighed. "Mom, you can't just show up. You should have called." "I didn't want to bother you. That's not—" He stopped himself, glanced over his shoulder. "Look, we've got stuff going on today. It's not a good time." "I'll be at the Wyndham on 5th, I said, gently tugging my suitcase back toward the steps. He blinked. "Wait, that's it?" "That's it." I turned and walked down the front path, the air still thick with the scent of eucalyptus and new landscaping. My spine straight, my steps slow but steady. Seth didn't call after me. He didn't offer to help with the bag. He just closed the door. I walked 3 blocks before calling a cab. Back at the hotel, I tipped the driver more than I needed to, reflex from another life. The clerk greeted me with the same sugary tone all receptionists seem to use with women my age. "Oh, Mrs. Rose, your room's ready." "Need help with your luggage?" I said no, thank you, and made it up the elevator with no incident. I sat on the edge of the bed, kicked off my shoes, and looked at my hands. I used to have rings on every finger. Now just the simple gold band from my wedding to Peter. God rest him. 21 years gone. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then I opened my purse and took out the envelope. Seth's account details, the monthly transfers, the trust account I had opened when he was promoted, the automatic withdrawals for the mortgage, the car, the insurance for the kids. All of it. Quietly managed for the past 6 years. He didn't even know how much. Maybe he'd forgotten where it came from, or maybe he never really thought about it. That money just showed up, month after month, like sunrise. I looked at the time. 11:26 a.m. Still hours until check-in for the next flight home. Instead, I reached for the room phone and dialed the bank. The hold music played softly, a delicate piano melody interrupted every 30 seconds by a cheerful voice thanking me for my patience. I sat motionless in the hotel armchair, one hand on the receiver, the other resting on the folder of papers I'd brought with me like a talisman, printed balances, copies of authorizations, letters I'd never sent. "Mrs. Rose?" A man's voice broke through. "This is Alan from Goldleaf Bank. How can I assist you today?" "Yes, good morning," I said, clearing my throat. "I'd like to discuss the standing orders and trust accounts under my name. Specifically, Those connected to my son, Seth Rose. There was a polite pause. Of course. For security, I'll just need to verify. I answered his questions calmly. Birthday, address, last 4 digits of my social security number. The call went smoothly, mechanically. I'd always been good at keeping my papers in order, a habit left over from Peter's bookkeeping days. Thank you, Mrs. Rose, Alan said after a brief pause. I see several scheduled transactions here. Would you like to modify them? No, I said. I'd like to cancel them. All of them. Another pause. All of them? Yes? He cleared his throat. May I ask, just for our records, what the reason is for the full termination? I've reconsidered my financial obligations, I said, and I've realized they're not obligations at all. Alan didn't know what to say to that. I heard soft typing on the other end. The transfers include mortgage payments, a vehicle lease, insurance premiums, and tuition for a private preschool, he said cautiously. Some of these are scheduled monthly through the end of the year. I'm aware. There may be early termination fees depending on the providers. I'll pay them. More typing. Understood. We can process the cancellations today. Would you like a summary emailed to you? Yes, please. And one more thing. Of course. There's a secondary account in my granddaughter's name. I'd like to increase the principal deposit and remove her father as a secondary beneficiary. A moment of silence. We can do that. I'll need to transfer you to our trust services, and they'll walk you through the updates. Good. I held the phone to my chest as he placed me on hold. In the mirror across from the desk, I caught my own reflection. My blouse slightly wrinkled, the necklace off-center. The kind of woman who used to rush into an argument, but now picked up the phone and called a bank instead. I didn't look angry. I looked finished. Like someone who had finally made a decision she should have made years ago. The hold music clicked off. Mrs. Rose? This is Daniela from Trust Services. I'm going to walk you through the beneficiary changes. We went through everything, slowly, thoroughly. I spelled my granddaughter's name, provided her birth certificate number, which I'd memorized when she was born, removed Seth from every field, signed the digital forms Daniela sent to my email, confirmed one by one that I understood each step. By the time we hung up, it was just past noon. I sat still for a long time, not triumphant, not sad, not even relieved exactly, just clear. The kind of clarity that doesn't come from drama or anger, but from finally running out of excuses. I opened the window. The sky over Los Angeles was hazy, the air a mix of palm trees and traffic. I used to love this city when Peter and I came out for conferences in the 70s. It felt glamorous then, untouchable. Now it just felt loud. I took a slow breath and picked up my phone. Still no call from Seth. I scrolled through our message history. Sparse. He'd texted a photo of the new house last winter. Before that, a thank you after the last wire transfer. No, how are you, Mom? No birthday card this year. I sent a single message. Your accounts have been closed. You'll need to handle your own payments from now on. I watched the little delivered icon pop up. No read receipt. Of course. I turned off the phone, stood up, and walked to the bathroom. Splashed cold water on my face, toweled off slowly. Then I reached for my purse, grabbed my wallet, and headed downstairs. There was a bank branch 3 blocks from the hotel. I walked the whole way. The teller at the branch smiled at me like I was someone's lost grandmother who'd wandered in by mistake. Can I help you today? Yes, I said. I'd like to close several accounts and speak to a manager. Her smile faltered. Certainly. One moment. They brought out a young woman with a tidy bun and a pinstripe blazer. She extended her hand politely, professionally. Mrs. Rose, I'm Vanessa. Would you like to come with me? I followed her into a small office, cool and too bright. The kind of room where people apologize or confess things they wish they'd done differently. She gestured toward a chair. I understand you'd like to close some accounts. Yes, I said, placing my folder on the table. All accounts associated with transfers to Seth Rose, including anything linked to the Westfield mortgage or Silver Palm tuition. And I've already spoken to your trust services about the updates to my granddaughter's account. Vanessa blinked, recovering quickly. Certainly. If you don't mind, I'll just verify those transactions. She typed for a while. I sat silently, watching her screen reflect in her glasses. We can process the closures today, she said. The remaining balances will transfer back to your primary account. Do you wish to retain the main investment portfolio? For now? She nodded. There's a note here, she added, from your portfolio advisor. He wanted to confirm whether the recent asset freeze was intentional. It was. I signed what felt like a dozen forms. Vanessa walked me through each one, never commenting, never asking questions beyond the necessary. I appreciated that. There was something comforting in how impersonal it all was. For once, nobody was trying to make me feel guilty or explain myself. Just paper, just ink. She placed the final set of documents in a neat envelope. That's everything, she said. You'll receive confirmation emails by end of day, and if your son has any questions— He won't, I said. But if he does, you can refer him to me. I have nothing left to hide. She looked at me carefully then, like a nurse noticing a patient who wasn't bleeding, but had clearly been hurt. Is there anything else I can do for you today, Mrs. Rose? Yes, I said, rising. You can walk me to the door. She did, and when we reached the lobby, she hesitated. I don't know what happened, she said quietly. But for what it's worth, you're not the first parent who's done something like this lately, and you won't be the last. I nodded. Outside, the sunlight was harsh but honest. I stood there for a few minutes, letting the warmth touch my face, letting my eyes adjust. Then I walked to the corner cafe and ordered a cup of tea. Jasmine. No sugar. Same as always. I sat at a small metal table on the patio, the envelope of bank papers on my lap. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't picturing Seth's face when the payments failed. I wasn't imagining the arguments or the panic. I was thinking about an old yellow kitchen in Michigan where Seth used to sit on the counter with jam on his chin, kicking his heels while I baked muffins before school. I was thinking about the first check I ever wrote him, $900 for his college textbooks, scribbled on a kitchen table with a broken leg. I was thinking about the birthday card he gave me when he was 8, the one with a stick figure drawing and "You're the bestest mom forever" written in red crayon. And I was thinking about how none of those things seemed to matter to him anymore. I sipped my tea slowly. 2 women passed by pushing strollers, talking about preschool wait lists and organic lunchboxes. I listened to them with a strange kind of detachment, like I was watching a play I'd already performed in, years ago. The future belonged to someone else now. That was okay. I wasn't trying to reclaim my youth. I was trying to reclaim something more difficult, the quiet dignity of not being needed by people who only called when they needed something. My phone buzzed in my purse. A message. I didn't look at it. Instead, I watched a small sparrow land on the edge of the table. It tilted its head, watching me. Then it took a crumb from the saucer and flew away. When I turned my phone back on, there were 7 missed calls. 3 from Seth. 1 from an unknown number I assumed was Amanda, his wife. The rest from a Los Angeles area code I didn't recognize. Maybe the mortgage lender. Maybe someone from the school. All of them grouped within the same frantic window between 2:15 and 2:45 p.m. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't open the texts. Instead, I slipped the phone back into my purse and walked back to the hotel. The lobby had emptied out. The same receptionist gave me the same sugary smile as I passed, but I didn't return it this time. I took the elevator to my floor, slipped the key card into the lock, and let the room swallow me. It was quiet here, that kind of quiet you only get in hotels. Thick carpeted, artificially cooled, smelling faintly of bleach and lemon. I sat on the bed for a moment, then lay back fully dressed. My arms outstretched, my legs together. It felt like floating. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the phone. The newest message was from Seth. Just one line. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" The mortgage bounced. I didn't reply. Another message came in moments later. "You cut everything off? Without even talking to me? Are you serious?" And then, "Call me. Now." I didn't. I sat there instead, staring at the ceiling, counting the slow churn of the air vent. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel pride. I felt like I had stepped off a train that had been running for years with no brakes. A moving machine I didn't even realize I was trapped in until the doors slid open and I stepped into air. Another call came in. I let it ring out. Then, unexpectedly, a new name lit up the screen. Nora Rose. I sat up. Nora, his daughter, my granddaughter, 16 years old, going on 30, a girl who remembered to call me on holidays, who sent me silly photos of the dog, who once wrote me a letter thanking me for teaching her how to make apple pie from scratch. I answered. "Grandma?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart," I said gently. "Is everything okay?" "Dad's freaking out. He won't say what happened, but he's yelling and pacing, and Amanda slammed the door and said something about private school and lawyers and I don't know. It's really tense here." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry you're caught in it. Did you really cut the money?" "Yes." She was silent for a moment. "Why?" It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even confusion. It was a sincere question, the kind only someone young and unjaded could ask without layers of judgment. "Because I was being used," I said quietly, and I finally saw it for what it was. "But Dad, I'm not angry at you," I interrupted. "Or at anyone, really. I just can't keep giving to people who don't see me anymore. Not as a person." I heard her breathing, steady and slow. "Are you mad at me?" she asked, voice smaller now. "Never," I said. "Never once." I heard her exhale, then a pause. "I miss you," she said. "Even before all this, you used to come more. You used to send letters. I liked that." Tears pressed behind my eyes, not from pain, but from the sharpness of that honesty. "I thought maybe I wasn't wanted anymore," I admitted. "Sometimes people don't say it out loud, but they say it in other ways." "Not me," she said fiercely. "I always wanted you." I smiled. "I know. Are you still in LA?" "Yes. Can I come see you?" "I don't want you in the middle of this. I already am." The line went quiet. She didn't push, and I didn't stop her. We made a plan to meet the next day, downtown, neutral ground, somewhere with tea. When I hung up, the phone buzzed again. A new message from Seth. "How dare you drag Nora into this? This is between us." I turned the phone off. It wasn't between us anymore. She found me before I spotted her. I was sitting at a cafe on Grand Avenue, a little place tucked between a bookstore and an overpriced flower shop. The kind of place that served tea in proper pots, with mismatched cups and handwritten menus. I'd chosen a table outside, in the shade, hoping for quiet. But I didn't expect peace, not with everything still crackling around me like a distant storm. Then I heard, softly, "Grandma?" I turned, and there she was. Nora had grown taller since last summer. Her hair was longer now, pulled back into a loose braid, and she wore a dark green hoodie that looked borrowed from someone older. Still, her face was the same. That soft, curious look. Eyes like Peter's, wide and pale and serious. "You found me," I said, standing. She didn't hesitate, just stepped forward and hugged me, arms tight, her cheek against my shoulder. I held her back, steadying the moment before either of us said anything else. We sat down. She looked at me for a long moment, biting the edge of her thumbnail, then asked, "So, you really shut it all down?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "That's huge." I poured us both tea. "I think your father always assumed I'd keep it going until I was dead," I said. She gave a dry little laugh. "Honestly, I think so too." We drank in silence for a while. Around us, the city went on. People passing with shopping bags, music leaking faintly from a nearby window, someone talking too loudly on the phone across the street. It all blurred together into background, like the past. "I don't think he really sees you," Nora said finally, stirring her tea. "I mean, not as a person." That caught me off guard. "Where'd you learn to say something like that?" She shrugged. "Therapy." I blinked. She grinned. "Mom makes us go every couple weeks. Family image and all that. But sometimes the lady says useful stuff, like how some people only value what you give, not who you are." I nodded, swallowing the heat rising in my throat. "I thought it was just me," I said. "It's not." She pulled something from her backpack, a folded piece of paper, thick and creased. "I brought this," she said, sliding it across the table. "Do you remember this?" I unfolded it. A recipe, written in crayon. My old pie crust, with Grandma's secret written at the top, the secret being lots of butter. At the bottom was her scrawled signature. Nora, age 8. "You kept this?" "Of course. It's on my wall." I looked up. "I didn't know that." "You don't know a lot of things," she said, not unkindly. "Like how you're the reason I want to be a writer. Or how I used to pretend I lived at your house when things at home were too loud." I stared at her, the words sitting in my chest like stones. "I'm sorry," I said. She frowned. "Why?" "For leaving the space open for them to define me. For going quiet." "You don't have to apologize," she said. "Not to me." We sat there for a long time, finishing the tea. Eventually, she looked down at her phone and winced. "I should head back. If I disappear too long, they'll go full detective." I nodded. "I don't want to make it worse for you." She leaned in, hugged me again. Then, as she pulled away, she asked, "Will you write to me again? Like the old letters?" "Of course." "Good. And will you—" She hesitated, eyes softening. "Will you come to my graduation next spring?" I smiled. "If I'm breathing, I'll be there." "Good." She stood. "I want people to see you, not just hear about you." I watched her walk down the block until she turned the corner. I stayed seated another 20 minutes, Not because I had nowhere to be, but because I didn't want to rush away from the feeling that maybe, just maybe, something in all this had been worth it. After Nora left, I didn't return to the hotel right away. I walked, no destination in mind, just one step after another through a city that wasn't mine. Past shops I'd never enter, restaurants with names I couldn't pronounce, people moving in sleek shoes and taut faces like everyone had somewhere important to be. I walked slowly, the way old women do when they've stopped apologizing for taking up space. There's a strange thing that happens when your life has been boiled down to 2 suitcases and a quiet hotel room. You begin to notice things: the chipped tile in a shop doorway, the warmth of the sun on your scalp, the sound of someone laughing behind a closed window. Everything feels sharper because there's nothing left to blur it. I passed a playground. Children climbing, sliding, shouting. A woman sat on a bench, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Her toddler was trying to show her a leaf, but she didn't notice. I wanted to tell her, "Take the leaf. You'll miss the moment otherwise." But I said nothing. It wasn't my place. Eventually, I found myself at a small public garden. Raised beds, native plants, a stone bench beneath a pepper tree. I sat. The sun filtered through the branches, dappling the gravel path with gold. Somewhere nearby, water trickled from a fountain. I closed my eyes, and I thought of Peter, my husband, gone 2 decades now. A kind man, quiet, but not weak. He'd been the one who taught me how to hold my ground, even when my hands shook. He used to say, "Geraldine, you don't raise children to owe you. You raise them to stand on their own. But they should look back once in a while." Seth hadn't looked back in years. He'd marched forward, degree, wife, house, titles, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being his mother and started being his funding. And I let it happen. I enabled it. Just like I enabled his silences, his clipped phone calls, his apologies that never quite arrived. I mistook distance for independence. I thought, if I stayed useful, I'd stay welcome. That's the real heartbreak, isn't it? Not when someone stops loving you, but when they keep accepting your love and stop returning it. I don't blame him for growing up. I blame myself for shrinking. I opened my purse and took out the notebook I'd packed from home. A little leather-bound one, with Peter's name still scribbled inside the cover. I'd used it years ago to track grocery lists and bills. Now I turned to a fresh page. What do I want? I wrote the question at the top. It looked strange, even childish, in my own handwriting. And below that, I wrote, peace. A smaller home? Just mine. Tea in the morning with no phone ringing. Letters to Nora. Music that's only for me. My name on the mailbox, not anyone else's debt. Silence. But the kind that feels like breath, not punishment. I underlined the last line. Twice. An older man walked past, nodded at me. I nodded back. We were the same kind of invisible. The breeze shifted. I sat there for a while longer, writing down memories that didn't ache anymore. Seth as a boy, running through sprinklers. Peter falling asleep during old movies. Me, dancing in the kitchen alone once everyone had left the house. I wrote until the sun dropped behind the trees. Then I stood, folded the notebook, and began walking again. Not away from anything, toward. He was waiting in the hotel lobby. I saw him through the glass doors before I even stepped inside, sitting on one of those low, modern chairs no one over 40 can get out of easily, elbows on knees, scrolling through his phone like a man trying to avoid himself. Seth, my son. I paused outside for a moment, smoothing the front of my cardigan. Not for his sake, but for mine. Then I pushed the door open and walked in. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from crying. I knew him too well. But from stress, from sleeplessness. He stood quickly when he saw me. "Mom?" I didn't smile. "Seth?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, I wondered if he'd try to hug me. He didn't. I didn't know what else to do," he said. "You weren't answering." "No, I wasn't." "Why?" "You said everything you needed to on the porch." He exhaled sharply, ran a hand through his hair. "Can we go somewhere? Talk? Properly?" "There's nothing to explain in private that can't be said here." He looked around the lobby, then reluctantly gestured toward a quieter corner with a fake plant and 2 armchairs. We sat. He stared at me. I let the silence hold. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry. Okay?" I was surprised. I didn't mean what I said. I tilted my head. "Which part?" He looked down. "That you came for money." "Did I ask you for anything, Seth?" "No, but you assumed." His jaw tightened. "It's just, you don't usually show up like that. Amanda was stressed. The kids were sick. I didn't come to see Amanda." He stopped, swallowed. "I came to see you. You bragged about the new house. You told me to visit. And when I did, you treated me like a problem." He ran his hand over his mouth. "I know, I screwed up." I nodded. "Yes, you did?" He leaned back in the chair, defeated. "Okay, fine. I was wrong. But you didn't have to cut everything." "I didn't have to do anything," I said, my voice calm. "I chose to." "But what about the kids' school? The car? You know Amanda's not working right now." "That's not my responsibility." His eyes snapped to mine. "You're their grandmother. And you're their father." He blinked, hard. "I helped for years, Seth. Quietly. Consistently. I never asked for thanks. But when you made it clear that my presence was unwelcome, I didn't mean it like that." "You did," I said, not unkindly. "And it's okay that you did. What's not okay is expecting my money without my humanity." He flinched. For once, he had no clever answer. I sat forward, resting my hands on my knees. "I'm not angry," I said. "Truly, I'm just done. And that's different." He looked away. "You talked to Nora." I did. "She's just a kid, Mom. You shouldn't involve her." "She involved herself." He was quiet again. Then, "She said you're moving." I didn't say that. "But you are." I gave a small smile. "I'm considering it." "To where?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere smaller, quieter, somewhere that doesn't cost me pieces of myself." He stared at the carpet, his voice low. "So that's it?" "Yes," I said. "That's it." He stood, then sat back down. Agitated, lost. Not because he'd lost the money, but because he couldn't control the story anymore. "I'll figure something out," he muttered. "I know you will." "You always do," he added bitterly. I stood. "Not anymore." He didn't follow me when I walked away. Back in my hotel room, I sat at the desk and opened my notebook to a fresh page. Not the kind where you list goals or plans, not one for numbers or names or addresses. A page for myself, for the things I never said out loud. Not to Peter, not to Seth, not even to Nora. Things that lived in the back of my mind like furniture in a locked room. At the top, I wrote, "Letter I won't send." Then I began. "Seth, when you were born, I was 28 and terrified. You came out red-faced and screaming, fists already clenched like you had something to fight. Peter cried. I didn't. I just held you and felt this ache in my chest I couldn't name. That ache never really went away. I tried to be everything. A mother, a wife, a bookkeeper, a baker. A woman who never asked for help and never complained. I thought if I made your life easier, you'd love me more for it. That if I filled the silence with doing, you wouldn't notice what I lacked. I didn't go to college. I didn't know how to argue theory or make small talk at corporate dinners. But I knew how to stretch a dollar, how to pack a lunch that didn't go soggy, how to sit beside you during thunderstorms even when I was tired to the bone. I watched you grow smarter than me, quicker, more polished. You learned how to speak to strangers in ways I never could, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person to you. I became a resource, a fallback, a name on an account that you didn't even look at unless the numbers dropped. You said once, maybe not to me, maybe to Amanda, that I was a sweet old woman who means well. I heard you. I remember where I was standing, by the sink, drying a dish I'd already dried. You thought I didn't hear, but mothers always hear. And that's the part that hurts, Seth. Not that you used me, but that you pitied me. Because I was never helpless. I just loved you. I loved you enough to sign over my savings, to downsize my life, to ignore every sting and slight and empty promise. I loved you so much I tried to disappear, just so you'd have space to be proud of yourself. But I'm done disappearing. There is dignity in stepping away. There is power in saying, enough. You might not see it now. You may never. That's okay. Because this letter isn't for you. It's for me. I closed the notebook slowly, tracing the edges of the page with my thumb. Then I tore the letter out. Not because I regretted it, but because it had already done its job. I folded the page carefully, walked to the hotel trash bin, and placed it inside. Not crumpled, not thrown, just laid flat, like a paper burial. Some truths are only meant to be said once. I turned back to the window and watched the evening lights bloom across the skyline. Something inside me had shifted, not broken, just realigned, like a door that had always been open finally, gently closing. That night, I didn't dream about Seth. I didn't dream about the house or the fight or the money. I didn't even dream about Peter. For the first time in months, maybe years, I slept without images tugging at me from the past. When I woke, the world felt hushed, like it was holding its breath. I took my time, showered slowly, chose my clothes with care, not to impress, not to blend in, just to feel like myself. A soft cotton blouse, the one with the pale blue stripes, dark slacks, my pearl earrings, though no one would see them. Then I went downstairs and asked the concierge a simple question. Where can I buy a record player? The man blinked at me, startled, but he smiled. I think I can help you with that, ma'am. An hour later, I was back in my room with a small, portable turntable and 2 used vinyls I'd found in a shop tucked between a laundromat and a Thai bakery. Billie Holiday and Etta James. I placed the first record on the platter, set the needle, and turned the dial. The crackle filled the room first, that warm, imperfect sound of something real. And then Billie's voice, low and velvet smooth, poured out like honey. I sat in the armchair, legs tucked beneath me, and listened. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was a reclamation of space, of mood, of choice. I wasn't someone's guest. I wasn't waiting on a call. I wasn't calculating what anyone else needed from me. I was just a woman in a quiet room, letting the music wrap around her like silk. I made tea. Not because I should, but because I wanted to. Jasmine, again. No sugar, the way I like it. And when I sat down with my cup, I didn't reach for my phone. I reached for the book I'd packed and never opened, a novel I'd been meaning to read for years but never had the time. Funny how much time you suddenly have when you stop spending it on people who don't value it. The pages turned slowly. My fingers remembered the rhythm. For hours, I did nothing but read, sip tea, flip the record. At one point, the phone rang from the desk. I didn't get up. Let it ring. The guilt, the noise, the habit of responding. It was still there, but weaker, quieter, like a muscle long overused that was finally allowed to rest. By late afternoon, the light in the room turned golden. I opened the window slightly and let the breeze in. It carried the scent of traffic and sun-warmed concrete. Not pleasant, but real. I thought again about home. Not the house in Michigan. That was no longer home in the way people mean it. A building full of ghosts and photos. Too large, too empty, too far from anyone who saw me. No, I thought about what home could mean now. Maybe a cottage by the water, maybe a condo near a library, maybe just a one-bedroom somewhere with a little balcony and space for a turntable and a stack of records. Somewhere mine, somewhere earned. That evening, I wrote Nora a letter. Not the dramatic kind, just a small note. Thank you for the tea, for the words, for still seeing me. I'll write again soon. I didn't seal it. I'd post it tomorrow. As night fell, I didn't feel sad, not proud, not vindicated, just calm. And it occurred to me as I turned off the lamp and crawled into bed. This is what freedom sounds like. Not a shout, not a door slamming, just the quiet click of a switch and the darkness wrapping you gently. The letter from the attorney arrived the next morning. It was slipped under my hotel door in a plain envelope, hand-delivered by a courier who apparently didn't want to face the woman who no longer paid her son's bills. I knew what it was before I opened it. The return address was a firm I recognized. Seth had mentioned them once, years ago, when Amanda wanted to renegotiate her business contract. I'd paid that bill too. Funny how names stick. I made tea before I sat down to read. The letter wasn't angry, not on the surface, just polished, professional. The kind of language that pretends it's about clarity when really it's about pressure. Dear Mrs. Rose, our client, Mr. Seth Rose, has expressed concern regarding the recent closure of financial arrangements previously managed by you on his behalf. Specifically, the termination of funds connected to the mortgage of his primary residence, the educational expenses of his dependents, and several agreed-upon discretionary transfers. While we understand your legal right to amend or withdraw financial support, we are seeking clarification as to whether this decision reflects a permanent change, and if so, whether any provisions exist for transitional assistance. Please respond within 7 business days, etc., etc. I finished the letter, folded it carefully, and slid it back into the envelope. Then I placed the envelope in the hotel room's safe, not because I was afraid of losing it, but because I wanted it out of sight. It didn't anger me. It didn't even surprise me. It confirmed what I already knew. He hadn't come to see me in that lobby because he understood anything. He'd come to get the tap turned back on. And now that it wasn't working, he'd gone to the next level. I got dressed and walked 3 blocks to a law office I'd looked up the night before. The building wasn't flashy, low-rise, tucked between a Pilates studio and a dry cleaner, but the woman inside had kind eyes and steel in her voice. "Ms. Rose," she said when I stepped into her office. "I'm Marlene. You called about estate protection." "I did," I said. "But we'll also need to talk about a response letter." She smiled, understanding immediately. "I take it there's a son." "One," I said. "That's more than enough." I showed her the letter. She read it without blinking. Do you want to reply formally? She asked. Yes, I said, but not defensively. She leaned back in her chair. Tell me what you want. I want to protect what's mine. I want to ensure that the only person who has access to my accounts is me. And maybe, eventually, my granddaughter. And I want this letter, I said, tapping the envelope, to be the last time I'm contacted about money I no longer owe. She nodded slowly. We can do all of that. We spent 2 hours reviewing documents. She walked me through setting up an irrevocable trust for Nora, contingent on age and access, with a clear clause excluding Seth and Amanda. We redrafted my will. We updated power of attorney and medical proxies. Every paper I signed felt like reclaiming an inch of ground I didn't know I'd lost. Marlene was kind, but not soft. She didn't ask for the full story, just enough to do her job well. I appreciated that. As I stood to leave, she said, "You're not the first mother I've worked with who's had to make a boundary this late in life." I smiled. Feels late, but I suppose it's just on time. Outside, the sun was already high, the pavement warm under my shoes. I didn't go straight back to the hotel. I stopped at a corner market and bought a basket of strawberries, a cold bottle of sparkling water, and a newspaper. Then I found a bench in the shade, took off my shoes, and sat cross-legged like a girl half my age. I read the paper, ate the berries with my fingers, and let the heat settle into my skin. No calls, no demands, just silence. A silence I'd chosen. The first person I told was Nora. Not about the lawyer's letter, not about Seth's demands, just the decision. I called her in the afternoon after the heat had softened and the light turned golden on the hotel walls. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Grandma." "Hey, sweetheart. Got a minute?" Always. I could hear her walking, maybe in the backyard, maybe to avoid being overheard. That alone told me enough. "I wanted to let you know," I said, "that I've made some changes, legal ones. I've updated my will, set up a trust in your name. You won't be able to touch it until you're 25, and only then if you're not married to anyone who thinks you're a piggy bank." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You're serious?" "I am." There was a pause, then softer. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Just live well. That'll be enough." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad's been weird, quiet, but sharp too, like he's waiting to pounce. Amanda's worse. I think she's furious that I saw you." "She should be," I said calmly. "You saw something she's spent years trying to cover." "She said you're trying to divide the family." "No," I said. "I'm just no longer funding one." More silence. I could almost feel her weighing those words. Then, "Are you okay?" I looked out the hotel window where the sky had turned the color of dusty peaches. "I'm better than I've been in years." "That makes one of us," she muttered. My voice softened. "Sweetheart, you're not responsible for anyone else's maturity, not even your parents', not even mine." She let that settle, then asked, "What happens now?" "I live my life," I said. "You live yours. And if we're lucky, those two lives intersect often, and with kindness." "That's it?" "That's everything." I heard her exhale. "I want to come visit you, not now, but later, somewhere quiet, wherever you end up. I'd like that." "You always felt like the real adult in the room, you know," she said. "Even when I was little." I blinked, then smiled. "I didn't always feel like one. Maybe that's why you were." We talked a little more, about school, about a book she was reading, about the dog chewing through another pair of sneakers. Then we said goodbye. I hung up the phone and felt that rare, fragile kind of joy that doesn't come with trumpets or fireworks, just a warmth behind the ribs. A reminder that some threads still hold. I spent the rest of the evening writing. Not a journal, not a letter. Just pieces of myself. Memories I wanted to put somewhere outside my head. Not to be dramatic, but to be accurate. The first time Seth lied to me. The day Peter taught Nora to float in the lake. The sound of my mother's voice when she sang while folding laundry. The dress I wore the first time I felt beautiful after 50. Little things. True things. No one else had to read them. They were for me. To remember who I'd been. Who I still was. Because that's the cruel trick, isn't it? They try to make you forget. Quietly. Slowly. With polite dismissals and small jokes and unreturned calls. They don't say, you don't matter anymore. They just stop including you in the mattering. But I remembered. And I wrote it all down. By the time the sun disappeared, I'd filled 5 pages. My hand ached, but it was a good ache. I closed the notebook, placed it under my pillow, and turned off the light. No nightmares came, just sleep. Solid, still mine. She showed up unannounced. Knocked twice, quick and firm, the way only certain types of women do, those who assume the door will always open. I'd just finished breakfast. Tea still warm, the tray untouched by housekeeping. I looked through the peephole and saw her, blouse starched, lipstick perfect, standing as if she owned the hallway. I opened the door. Amanda. She smiled tightly. Geraldine. We stared at each other for a moment. May I come in? No, I said. The smile faltered. I think we need to talk. You think wrong. She crossed her arms. I won't take long. You already have. Her jaw tensed. I came here as a courtesy. That's not how courtesy works. There it was, that flicker, the mask slipping. She glanced down the hall, then back at me. You're being cruel. I'm being clear. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. You've put Seth in a terrible position. He put himself there. You've humiliated him. The mortgage company called. The school's billing department sent a notice. You've created chaos. I stopped enabling it. He's your son. I'm aware. And Nora. She's still a child. She's more of an adult than either of you. That landed. I saw it in her eyes. She hated being called out more than being insulted. I don't know what you think you're doing, she said, but this show of independence, this little rebellion, it's beneath you. Ah, I said, there it is. What? The real reason you're here. Not to apologize, not to understand. You came to remind me where I belong. I came, she snapped, to remind you what family means. Family, I repeated. You mean the kind that only functions when I stay quiet and pay on time? She flushed. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm finally straightening them. She fell silent. Behind her, a cleaning cart rattled around the corner. The housekeeper paused when she saw us, then quietly turned back. Amanda followed the motion, then looked at me. We're not monsters, she said, softer now. We've been under pressure. The kids, the house, Seth's job. I carried that pressure for 10 years, I said. Silently, gladly. But pressure is not an excuse for cruelty. We weren't cruel. No, I said. You were calculated. That's worse. She said nothing. Then colder. And Nora? You're dragging her into this mess. She walked in on her own. She's confused. She's observant. Amanda shifted, her perfect posture finally cracking. You've burned a bridge, she said quietly. You don't come back from this. I'm not trying to. She blinked, slowly, then nodded. Then I suppose there's nothing else to say. Except goodbye, I said. I closed the door, not slammed, not angry, just done. And when I turned back into the room, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't played the game. I woke up the next morning with a decision fully formed in my chest. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with trumpets. It just sat there, steady, quiet, complete, like a suitcase already packed. I was going to sell the house in Michigan. It had taken me longer than it should have to admit what I'd known for years, that it wasn't home anymore. Not since Peter died. Not since Seth stopped visiting. Not since the neighbors I used to bake for moved or passed or stopped waving from their porches. What remained was a shell. A well-kept one, yes. The lawn trimmed, the furnace updated, the kitchen still smelling faintly of cinnamon if the windows stayed shut. But it hadn't held a family in a long time, just history, and a kind of grief that hung in the corners like dust no vacuum could reach. I called my real estate agent, the same woman who sold us that house in 1981. Her voice hadn't changed. Brisk, capable, warm in a businesslike way. "Well, Geraldine," she said, "I can't say I'm surprised." "No? Not after the last few years? You've been holding on for someone else's sake." I smiled. "Not anymore." She promised to handle everything: photos, appraisals, listings. I didn't need to fly back unless I wanted to. I told her I didn't. The house would sell. It was a good house. It just wasn't mine now. I hung up and sat by the window with a fresh cup of tea, watching the city wake up. My room overlooked a rooftop garden on a neighboring building. From up here, the greenery looked almost accidental, like someone had thrown seeds in frustration, and beauty had grown despite it. I thought about where I'd go next. Not back to the Midwest. I wanted something smaller, simpler. A one-bedroom near the water, maybe, or near a park. Somewhere walkable. Somewhere I could hear birds in the morning and not lawnmowers. But more than the location, I thought about the feel. I wanted warmth, not from things, fancy fixtures or updated cabinets, but from peace. From knowing that every corner of a place was mine, that no one would arrive expecting space, that no footsteps would echo that didn't belong. That afternoon, I began sorting through my things online. Bank boxes, old files, photographs. I looked at a picture of Seth at 16, squinting into the sun, braces halfway through, holding a fishing pole with pride. I didn't cry. I placed the photo in a folder labeled Keep for Nora. She'd want to see him that way. Not as he was now, but as he once was. As someone becoming. I found a pair of earrings I hadn't worn in years and packed them in a small box. On the lid, I wrote her name. A necklace Peter gave me on our 25th anniversary? Hers too. But the rest, I'd let go. Let it pass into other hands. Let it become someone else's firsts and favorites. I was done curating a museum no one visited. That evening, I took myself out to dinner. Not room service. Not a quiet salad at the hotel cafe. I walked down the street, found a restaurant with soft lighting and linen napkins, and asked for a table for one by the window. The waiter smiled at me with the practiced warmth of someone trained to see lone diners as sad. But I wasn't sad. I ordered pasta. Real pasta. With butter and herbs and too much garlic. I asked for a glass of wine. I read a book between bites. I watched people pass outside the window and didn't feel left behind. No one called. No one needed anything. No one interrupted. I left a generous tip. Back in my room, I wrote a list of apartments to visit, I gave myself 2 weeks in Los Angeles to explore. Then I'd move. Maybe closer to Nora. Maybe not too close. Enough to be reachable, not responsible. As I got into bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked older than the last time I'd really looked. Softer in some places, thinner in others. My hair more silver than white. But I looked full. Not filled up by others. Just full. Of memory. Of decision. Of something like peace. It was Nora who helped me find the apartment. Not because I asked, because she offered. She showed up one morning with a printed list, highlighted, categorized, annotated in her neat handwriting. 1-bedroom units, all within 20 minutes of her school. Not too close, not too far, she said with a grin. Just enough. We spent the day touring them. She took photos, asked the hard questions I wouldn't have thought to, about heating, noise levels, laundry hookups. She had a clipboard. She meant business. I watched her with something close to awe. This young woman, half child, half fire, had taken it upon herself to protect me. Not in a grand way, in a quiet, efficient, unshowy way that made me feel both proud and heartbroken. At one point, after visiting a small unit with yellow curtains and a slanted balcony, she turned to me and said, "Do you want to love where you live, or just be safe in it?" I stared at her. She shrugged. "I think you deserve both." That was the one we chose, the yellow-curtained place. It was small, yes, but sunlight poured through the windows in the morning, and you could hear birds in the courtyard. There was a corner in the living room perfect for my chair and record player, a little nook near the kitchen where I could write. It wasn't impressive, but it felt honest. We signed the lease that week. She came with me to pick up the keys. "You sure you're ready?" she asked, dangling them in the air. "More than ready," I said, and took them from her hand. The move itself didn't take long. I had little left to move. A few boxes from storage, my clothes, the notebooks. I didn't bring furniture. I wanted this place to be furnished by the life I had now, not the one I'd spent years carrying for others. I bought a second-hand couch in a mossy green, a wooden table just big enough for two, a kettle I actually liked the look of, and I moved in on a Thursday. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just me, in a space that echoed with absence for the first few hours, and then, slowly, with my breath. That night, Nora came over with Thai takeout and a tiny houseplant. "It's a pothos," she said. "Hard to kill, even if you forget. It exists for weeks, it forgives you." "I want to be like that," I said, smiling. "You already are." We ate on the floor, the food spread out on a towel because I hadn't bought plates yet. She told me about school, about her English teacher who talked too much, and her friend who'd just come out to their parents. She was gentle, curious, bright in ways no one had taught her to be. At some point, she looked around the apartment and said, "It feels like you." I looked at the soft yellow walls, the open windows, the empty bookshelf waiting for new stories. "I think it is me," I said. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet. Not the lonely kind, the restful kind, the kind that asks nothing of you. I lit a candle, not scented, just beeswax, and placed it by the window. Then I played Billie Holiday again and poured myself a glass of water and let the music thread through the new space like a blessing. I thought of Seth only once, not in anger, not in longing, just as someone I used to know, someone I may still speak to someday, or not. Either way, it was no longer my job to carry that possibility like a prayer. It could come or go. I'd be fine. Because this little apartment, this quiet, plant-filled, curtain-soft space, it didn't represent retreat. It represented arrival. I didn't expect the letter. It arrived 2 weeks after I moved in. Not an email, not a text. An actual envelope, hand-addressed in Seth's sharp, angular print. No return address. Just my name, my new place, written correctly. I stood there for a moment, holding it like it might be hot. Then I opened it. No apology. Of course not. But not an accusation, either. It was a strange kind of letter. Disjointed. A little too formal, like he'd written it 3 times and still didn't know what tone to strike. He said he was surprised I'd gone through with it. He said Amanda was adjusting. He said Nora had made her position clear. Then, further down, he wrote, "I didn't think it would ever come to this. I always assumed you'd be there. Not in a bad way. Just steady. You always were." I sat down to finish reading it. He talked about the mortgage, how they'd refinance, how the preschool was now off the table, but maybe that was for the best. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't say I was wrong either. And at the very end, in smaller letters, a different ink, as if it had been added just before mailing, he wrote, "Nora still talks about you like you're a lighthouse. Maybe you always were." That line stayed with me for hours. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because the letter wasn't really meant to be answered. It was a record, a flag in the ground, proof that somewhere in him something had moved. That was enough. A few days later, Nora visited again. She brought groceries this time, claimed she wanted to practice domestic life, but I think she just liked putting the apples in the fridge, humming off key while she moved through my kitchen like it belonged to her, too. I let her. We baked that day. Real baking. Pie crust from scratch, my recipe, the one she used to call magic. She rolled the dough too thin, and we laughed about it. I told her the trick with cold butter. She told me about a short story she was writing for school, a grandmother who vanished into the woods and came back stronger. After the pie went into the oven, she stood at the sink, washing her hands. "You know," she said, "I used to wish I could live with you." "You still can," I said. "There's a couch with your name on it." She smiled, but shook her head. "I mean when I was little. When things were rough at home, I'd pretend I had a secret key to your place. In my head, you had a sunroom full of plants and a cat that only listened to Billie Holiday." Sounds better than my actual place back then. She dried her hands on a towel. "This one's even better," she said. "We ate the pie while it was still too hot. Burned our tongues. Didn't care." After she left, I sat by the window with my tea and wrote the final line in my notebook. I did not go quietly. I left on my feet. That's what I wanted Nora to remember. Not the drama, not the money, not the fight, but the quiet act of standing up, the grace of saying enough, the dignity of walking away not in anger but in clarity. Too many women I knew had shrunk with age, not because their bodies demanded it, but because their world told them they should. Take up less space. Speak less. Ask for nothing. I had done that too, for a while. Longer than I care to admit, but not anymore. Now, each morning, I rise with no one else's rhythm in my bones. I make my tea, I water the pothos, I play music that was always mine. Some days I walk, some days I write, some days I do nothing at all, and all of it, every minute, is mine. The freedom didn't come loudly. It came like dusk, soft, inevitable, honest. And as I sit here now, pen in hand, light falling through the yellow curtains, I think, this is not the end of a story. It's the beginning of one I'm finally writing for myself. If this story moved you, even quietly, share it. Not for me, for the women who've stayed silent too long. Let them know it's never too late to leave with your name still intact.